Good morning and welcome to the Eliot Church virtual worship service of July 12th, 2020. Not only is it a special day, but it is Baseball Sunday, something that we all look forward to and something we've been doing for a number of years. I write for the Red Sox program and have for 25 years, including this year. And so I've been asked to organize the program, and I'm honored to do that. And we've typically tried to identify ways that baseball imitates life, or life imitates baseball, and are there any life lessons? Unfortunately, this year, baseball is too close to imitating life, and I'm going to focus on telling you stories that I received from players about how much they loved playing the game, what they had to do in the off season to be able to afford to play the game, and how they felt about the fans. So I think we'll give a minute to the current situation, and then the rest will be devoted to players from the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. So when I get discouraged about current baseball, I find that turning to history is the best possible antidote. Now, we can't be together, and that's unfortunate, but if we all take just a minute for personal reflection, it'll be as if we're together virtually.
Please join in our covenant. In the love of truth and in the spirit of Jesus, we unite for the worship of God and the service of all. And please join now in our song of exaltation.
Our prayer today is a prayer for health during the pandemic. It was written jointly by the members of the Interfaith Clergy Group here in Natick. But before we get to that, let us take a moment in silence to pray for those in need of our prayers today. And now let us pray. Dear God, we raise our voices in prayer for those who are suffering, physically and mentally, directly or indirectly from the current pandemic. Please help us to think not only of ourselves, but also of those people with whom we have come into contact, understanding that our perceived freedoms do not make us free if they cause the suffering of others. Please, God, open our eyes to the divine image in every person and to our obligation to protect their lives as we would our own. Help us to care for each other during this difficult time by strengthening us to put our own conveniences aside for the good of those who are most at risk, whether that risk is related to race, health, geography, economic circumstance, or any other measure. We are well aware that this illness has not affected all people equally. We acknowledge our privilege where we have it and pray that we keep our eyes and our hearts open as we join the fight for equal access to healthy communities. Help us, O God, to see our place in the interconnected web that binds all of creation together, so that we might bring about a diverse community of mutual care. And now, as Jesus taught us, let us pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
I'm not a Protestant. I'm not a Catholic. Not even Irish anymore. I think life has a purpose, and I know life is quick, and hatred and killing are not what life is for. Islamic, not even a Semite in this ancient holy land. I'm just a human being, made up of particles atomic, the same as those that make up the ground on which you stand. I'm shedding my ancient heritage of human insanity. I won't be pigeonholed into some group that's led. I won't become a part of the insane humanity, following some misguided leader until I'm used and dead. Inside and out, but we're all so easily confused. So what's all the fuss and fighting about? Why are we so easily used? We let them divide us into races, creeds, and nations, that we let those divisions serve as explanations for why we must fear others or posture as superiors, and forget we all have mothers and similar interiors. Let's get our act together. We're not Palestinians or Jews. We're not Christians, Muslims, or Buddhists. Nor are we Hindus. We're not Americans, Chinese, or Russian. Yellow, black, white, or tan. Let's end these long divisions and see the oneness of all man. Let's end these long divisions and see the oneness of our man. Let's end these long divisions and live in peace while we still can. We're all the same. We're all the same. We're all the same. We're all the same. We're not French or German, English or Portuguese. We're not Spanish or Italian, Korean or Japanese. We're not Bulufutra or Brazilian, Congolese or Dutch. We're not Egyptian or Australian, Argentinian and such. We're not Indonesian, Polynesian, Canadian, Angolan or Kiwis. We're not Mexican, Ethiopian, Nigerian or Pakistani. We're not Indians, Venezuelan, Peruvian, Iranian or Thais. We're all these things, but humans first. Let's open up our eyes.
The title of my reflection today is Greed, Avarice, and 3 base hits. And I don't think you need a scorecard at home to realize that greed is the players, avarice is the owners, and avarice is just a fancy word, more formal word for greed. What's most distressing is they managed to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. It was a wonderful opportunity to showcase the game, demonstrate that we're tuned in to what's going on in life, and that chance is gone. So let's talk about the players who really loved the game. And I can't think of a better place to start than Mr. Red Sox, Johnny Pesky. He broke in with the Red Sox in 1942, and he was still active with the club when he passed away in 2012. 70 years in professional baseball. And he said, Herb, I would have played the game for nothing. And we had a discussion, and he acknowledged what he really meant was if the Red Sox paid him enough to take care of himself and his family, he really wasn't playing for any more money. He was playing for the competition. So the focus was on winning and particularly beating the Yankees. And he told me a story about 50 years later going to a banquet in New York, a fundraiser, and somebody thought it would be a good idea to sit Johnny with the Yankee players of the 1940s, Vic Rashes, and they didn't want me sitting there any more than I wanted to sit there, John said. But he said, after we got talking about baseball, we realized we're okay. But keep in mind, that's 50 years after their active careers are over. And even though he was paid the market value, he still had to work in the off season. A lot of us remember the window boys, and the most interesting job he had was picking up the telephone and calling people at random and trying to sell them Red Sox tickets. So certainly if we picked up the phone, it was Chris Sale saying, how would you like a 10-pack? We'd be quite surprised, and I assume people were surprised at that time as well. And John, at spring training, would, in full uniform, go into the stands, sit and talk with the fans, and do everything he could to make sure they were enjoying the game. Next former player I'm going to talk about is our neighbor Joe Morgan, Walpole Joe Morgan. Joe's about 8 miles from here, and I think if we all showed up to talk baseball, Joe would welcome us with open arms. He spent 40 years in professional baseball, 15 of them as a player, And during those 15 seasons as a player, he played in 15 different cities. But what was amazing to me was wherever he went, he took his family. And he said, family first. We had 5 kids. We weren't going to disrupt our family life, and we just made it work. And the other thing interesting about Joe is the number of jobs he had and the kind of jobs he had. He was a bill collector. He was a tax preparer. He was a substitute teacher. He worked for the town. He worked as a mailman, a couple of winters actually. But the most interesting, and these are Joe's words, best job I ever had was driving a truck for the Mass Turnpike. He said at least once a week, one of those big tractor trailers would turn over and we'd get to split the cargo. He said, if you have 5 kids, if you can go home with 4 cases of tuna fish, it's a good day. And what I remember best about Joe is being at a game with my son when he was about 10 years old. And we'd get there an hour early, which is the best part, as some of you know. And we're standing over by the right field foul pole. Joe came over and he talked to us for 5 minutes. And, my son was in heaven. Now, as it turns out, 20 years later, I'm sitting in Joe's den talking about baseball, admiring his well-worn encyclopedia of baseball. And I told him that story. And he said, whenever I would spot a parent in the stands with a child, if I possibly could, I would go over to them, talk to them, make them feel at home, and hoping that they'd love this game as much as we do. So for me, it's difficult to reflect on Joe driving his wife and 5 kids around and working, plowing. In fact, he helped plow us out in the blizzard of 1978. It's hard to equate that with today's situation, at least for me. Now I'm going to tell you a story that includes a trip to the Holy Land, a small chapel in North Carolina, and an angel in a bar in Inman Square, Cambridge. The player I'm talking about is Gene Conley, whose off-season job was playing for the Boston Celtics, and not just sitting on the bench and waving. He played 15, 20 minutes a game. And when the Celtics season would come to an end, the regular baseball season would have started, but he would go down to Florida for a couple of weeks, get his arm in shape, and then he'd come back and he was a starting pitcher for the Red Sox. So that's probably the most unusual off-season job. And in 1962, the Red Sox were in New York City, stuck in a traffic jam, and Gene decided it'd be a good idea to get off the bus, have himself a short brew, and when he came back out, the bus was gone. So Gene decided, well, as long as I'm here, I may as well take a little bit of a vacation. And so for the next 3 days, he was AWOL from the Red Sox. And in the middle of that, he went to LaGuardia and attempted to get a ticket to fly to the Holy Land. And of course, that was a great story for the writers, and it's still told to this day. And when it came to that part of my interview, he said, do I really have to talk about that? I'm so tired. I said, Gene, if we don't talk about it, people are going to think it's a paid advertisement for the Red Sox. So let's get through it. He said, well, I'm going to tell you something I've never told anybody before. Typically when the media asks me about it, I just chuckle and move on. He said, but the fact is, my wife was a Seventh-day Adventist. And every night she would sit with the kids and they'd read the Bible. And I was over in the corner with my Field and Stream magazine. And it occurred to me in my AWOL moment that if I flew to the Holy Land, perhaps I would understand at last why this all meant so much to them. Now, in retrospect, I wish I hadn't done it, and it's what people remember me for, and that's really kind of unfortunate. So Gene stuck around baseball for another couple of years, and then his arm gave out, and he actually was pitching at the end in the low A minors, And when he was released, a little town in North Carolina, he went into the town, bought a Greyhound bus ticket, had a couple of hours to kill, so he went over to a little chapel that was open, and he said, I actually started crying because I realized I didn't know how to do anything except pitch and dribble a basketball. And I just didn't know what I was going to do. And he said, kindly man came over to me and said, what's wrong, son? Did you lose your mama or your papa? And he said, no, I lost my fastball. So Gene had a great sense of humor even for difficult moments. After he did retire, he turned out to be a hugely successful salesman because everybody wanted to meet Gene Conley, everybody wanted to talk to him, so he could get in anywhere he wanted to. Unfortunately, his drinking became a real problem, and a problem that his wife, his family, his doctors, everybody you could think of had counseled him that he had to give it up. And he said, one day I had made a big sale, 3:30 in the afternoon, found a sleazy bar in Inman Square, went in there, 3 other derelicts. And he said, the young man across from me said, you're Gene Conley, aren't you? And he said, I still enjoyed being recognized. So I said, yes, I am. He said, you know what? It really makes me sad to see you in here like this. You were one of my heroes. And Gene said he paused for a second, and he paid his bill, got up, and left the bar, and never, ever had another drink. And he lived another 50 years. So he said, I'd never seen him before, never saw him again. So to this day, I think of him as my guardian angel. And he was one of the best natured players I've ever interrupted. And he said anytime he was asked, he would speak to anyone, former player, about the hazards of drinking. And I want to tell you about Bill Momboquette, the pride of Medford, Massachusetts. And Bill had a number of stories for me. He pitched for the Red Sox for 8 years and just a wonderful guy. And he said, I'd be sitting in the clubhouse, I'd look across the way, and there was some rookie who had made 2 errors and struck out 3 times, hanging his head. And I'd say, okay, kid, come with me. And he'd say, whoa, just grab that bag. They'd hop in a cab, and they'd go to Dana-Farber, and they would play with the kids for an hour and 15, until the kids were tired up. And he said, once we got to the elevator, I'd look them in the eye and say, you think you had a bad day. And that was a tradition that went on with the Red Sox for many, many years. Another interesting thing about Bill is that he grew up in West Medford, which was actually a stop on the Underground Railroad. And many people stopped right there. And so he grew up in a nice, thriving mix of whites and African American. He said, we were in and out of one another's homes, and never occurred to me, other than color, there was any difference. He said, I had to go to school to learn about prejudice. He said, that's quite a commentary on school. 1959, the Red Sox finally get Pumpsie Green up to the Red Sox, the last team to integrate. Shame on them. And very early on, when Pumpsie was there, the team was all in the dugout, and one of the crusty old coaches was throwing epitaphs, racial epitaphs, into the other dugout. And Billy hollered from the other end of the dugout, you got to cut that out, Del. Pumpsie's with us now. And Del Baker said, and what are you going to do about it? And Billy said, I'm going to knock you right on your keister in front of the whole team and anybody in the stands who can watch us. So Del just kind of walked away, and that was the end of any racial sorts of incidents with the Red Sox. So, I recognize that all of this happened in a very different time than from today, and there's a real trap of falling in love with nostalgia. But my observation is, having interviewed players from 8 decades, is that in the 40s, 50s, and the 60s, it was baseball first and entertainment second. Obviously, they charged money to come in and watch the game, and they tried to sell you a hot dog and a beer, but entertainment was a long way from a prior. Today, it's entertainment number one, and baseball presented in number two. And obviously, that's made a huge difference in how the players and the owners look at things. But I do want to end on a positive note. I actually interviewed 4 of the key players from the 2013 World Champion Boston Red Sox. And not only were they the world champions, but they actually totally immersed themselves in trying to do good following the marathon bombing incident. And I got to interview 4 of them. David Ross is now going to take over as the manager in Chicago for the Cubs. And I can understand that. I asked her, I said, you know, you folks did a lot. We all knew you did a lot, but there was very, very little publicity. And he said, you know, what we did was a good thing. Publicity negates that. And I knew I was talking to a quality guy. And when I asked him, any message for the fans of Boston, he said, I want to thank them for giving me the opportunity, giving all of us the opportunity to collaborate and help recovery from the marathon bombing. Again, indication of some great character. So, it's usually true in every era, whether it's baseball or whether it's real life, there are always good people and good things going on. Sometimes you just have to look a little harder.
As a follow-up to Herb's wonderful talk, which goes back some time to prior years in baseball, this is a poem that comes from 32 years ago. Ben was in his 5th year, and our other kids were also, older. Ben's older sister is 12 years older, so they were at different levels in their sporting careers, and I'd been involved with them from time to time and just loved the beauty of sports for kids. So I wrote this poem called Sports. Oh, the joys of organized sports. Kids learn lessons of all sorts. Play their hearts out, try to win. Become strong and tough within. When things go well, they are elated. The bubble bursts and they're deflated. How to be a graceful winner. How to be a raw beginner. Parents learn some things too. Flashbacks of the way they grew. The value of the game itself. Competitive urge pulled off the shelf. They cheer and scream and roll their eyes and try not hard not to criticize. Remembered greatness in the sport, but what the kids need is support. The coaches probably learn the most. Every party needs a host. The way they react sets the tone, so they must be careful not to moan. The fundamentals should be stressed. To teach team play and try your best. The common lesson learned by all is sportsmanship through rise and fall. So at this stage, we teach the youth the beauty of sports is the truth that on the fields of friendly strife is served a perfect slice of life. That skills are fine, but the true worth are attitudes and values given birth. It's sad that as the youngster grows, success in sports comes to mean the pros.
Katie Casey was baseball mad, had the fever and had it bad, just to root for the hounds and crew every Sue. Katie Blue. On a Saturday, her young beau called to see if she'd like to go to see a the show, but Miss Kate said no. I'll tell you what you can do. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out with the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I ever get back. Let me root for the home team. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game. Katie Casey saw all the games, knew the players by their first names, told the umpire he was wrong all along, good and strong. When the score was just 2-2, Katie Casey know what to do, just to cheer up the boys she knew. She made the gang sing this song. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out with the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I ever get back. Let me root for the home team. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game.
If a year from now we can all join with Moira to sing Take Me Out to the Ball Game, but this certainly is a serious time. And we want to wish all of you good health, comfort, and security. And we want to wish all that are dear to you the same thing. And of course, may you be safe at home.
To the ball game, take me out to